If you're listening to this, you are fucking insane. Cause I'm just gonna ramble about claspecting for like an hour or some shit. This is the raw audio of I decided to record the raw audio of me just kind of rambling about claspecting, and then I'm gonna write it down in a post somewhere on my blog Rosespecting. Um, and I decided that if you want to listen to me just like fucking talk for a while rather than that thing, then there you go. I don't know why I'm explaining this. You already know all this. Let's get into it. So, claspecting has been kind of methodicalized, if you know what I mean. And I have done a lot of that. I mean, I made a whole guide thing, and I think that is good. I like my guide, but I do think that it is a little bit dishonest. Uh, but I also think that pretty much anything regarding claspecting is a little bit dishonest. I don't think that I can possibly convey to you the truth of claspecting. I think that it is something that you need to feel for yourself. You need to identify these things. And if you don't, then you're gonna be lost. You're gonna be digging at stones, shoving that shovel up into those rocks, and you're not gonna get anywhere. And that sucks for you. And I decided that, you know, the only people who fucking care about claspecting are Homestuck fans. Like, that's not true, but it's kind of true. And most of you fucking Homestuck fans have read it, have read Homestuck. I would assume the majority, at this point. There was a time when that was not the case. But at this point, I would say the majority of Homestuck fans have read Homestuck. So here's the thing. Claspecting was never meant to be more than a vibe, you know? Hussey didn't want it to be more than just like, yo, this guy is like kind of a knight of blood, maybe. Let's call him Karkat. Obviously Hussey put a lot of thought into a lot of things, but I legitimately don't think that claspecting was ever a huge priority. And I think that is entirely understandable, because I think it is very much so. It's a thing made from theming and imagery, and we've refined it into this rigid thing, but it's never been a rigid thing. In Skaya alone, I've talked about this on my blog before. It's a malleable thing. You can be different from a seer of light, for instance, but then you're just in a doomed timeline. You're just not the right kind of seer of light. But ultimately, if that was the right timeline, you probably wouldn't be registered as a seer of light. You would be registered as like a mage of hope. That isn't that a that's another claspecting person, yeah. So in another universe, that's who I am. I'm that person. I don't know anything about them really, so I'm gonna avoid any pronouns. But so there's a train. I don't know if you can hear it. So claspecting is this very loose thing that we've refined, and I kind of want to just discuss it in a less methodical way, because I don't think it was ever meant to be that, and I would be lying if I said I don't think it's good that it has been. I think that has brought a lot more appeal to a lot more people. Um, but it also means that a lot of people are missing out on what it really is, myself included. I ruined classpecting for myself in a lot of ways by making it this methodical thing, by putting harsher rules to it than there needs to be or should be. Um, because classpecting is not a science. Well, it is a science, but it's not a strict science. Some sciences are like, you look at the plant and you're like, I think in 10 days this plant will be 8 inches taller if I use this soil. And then you use that soil and you use a plant that's not in that soil, that's in like other soil, and that soil, maybe it changes things, maybe it doesn't. You do this like 50 times and then you've got evidence, and you can maybe point out a correlation, maybe point out some causation, who knows. But so it's kind of a science, but it's not that kind of science, if you know what I mean. Which I hope you do, because I'm not going to explain it. Because this is already, we're like 6.5 minutes in. Okay. So, hope. I'm going to start with hope. I feel like I have done a disservice to hope in the refining of classpecting, the systemizing of it, more than most other aspects. Hope is not really something that can or should be tied down, and I think that rage is the same way. Rage is the aspect that I think is the hardest to put into words, and I think that is why it is so easily misrepresented and misunderstood. But I'm going to start with hope, because I want to talk about hope. Namely, because when I was younger, when I was about 13, I've said previously that if I had not been a seer of light, I would have been a seer of mind, and that is a lie. When I was 13, I sort of consciously chose between what I saw as something in line with seer of light and something in line with seer of mind, but it was actually me choosing some sort of hope player or seer of light. I don't know if I would have still been a seer if I remained as hopey as I was, but I was a very hope-filled child. I think you could say a lot of children are, but I really, really embodied that. And to this day, I still hold a lot of the aspect hope in me. I am unrepentantly optimistic. It's kind of horrifying. And so much of what I see as me being lucky is just me accepting circumstances as they come. I'll be like trying to get a certain result, and then I don't get that, but I get something else, and I'm like, oh, well, that result's probably better. And I justify it to myself, and then I feel this truth to it that I put faith into. And I call it me being really lucky. And when I was 13, about 13, I remember I was at a fair with my best friend at the time. And if you aren't aware, I am non-binary. Anyone who's gotten this far who cares enough about this probably knows that. I don't know. But at the time, I was just a tiny little boy. Uh, uh, but more importantly, I was a tiny little boy who thought uh, that he was a tiny little girl. This is not how I usually talk about gender, but I remember I used to talk with my best friend a lot about hypotheticals in which one or both of us became girls. And this night, it came up for some reason, and then um, my friend and also some random girl we met decided to pretend that I had suddenly magically turned into a girl. And I knew on a very real level that it wasn't true, but I also believed it. Not in any tangible way, but as I played along, it was less me playing and more me living that. Um, and that was one of the most magical nights of my life, and I have often, in recent times, described the difference between hope and light, in my experience at least, is feeling magic in the case of hope and understanding magic in the case of light. And I am glad that I understand it, but I do think that when you know a magic trick, how it's done, it no longer has that ability to capture you. That's something that I've learned in my acceptance of void, which uh, biggest part of this, the biggest thesis, that was a lot of S sounds, is that, as it turns out, aspects blend a lot. It's a very muddy sort of thing. And so I've been coming to accept all of the aspects a lot more, and I am very happy for that. I am very happy that my understanding is no longer in that rigid, honestly lighty perspective, seer-y, because I am a seer of light, but I don't need to let it paint everything to the extent that it did. I think that instinct is not healthy. I don't think you should strive to be the best of your class spect, regardless of what it is. I think ultimately you should be striving to do whatever it is you're striving to be. Beyond that, you should be working on your life, not on matching this image that you have in your head of what you should be. Focus instead on being something and refine it, figure out what works for you, experiment and explore. That's why at this point, I mean, some deep part of me has this feeling that, like, oh, if you change your class spect, then it just means you were that most recent one all along. But I don't know. I don't know. It's really easy to reframe your past. It is obscenely easy to reframe your past. You can bend the classes and aspects to be whatever you want, ultimately. I've seen that firsthand. I have seen some wild people. uh, and I don't think that that's good. I think it's important to meet it on the level that it's at and to understand that it. I don't want to say that you shouldn't put yourself into it, because if anything, I'm trying to say the opposite, but you shouldn't enforce yourself on it. You shouldn't paint it in your image. You should let it be a part of your paint. I don't know. Aspects are very interesting, and classes are less interesting to me, but also interesting, specifically in the way that they are categorized. I think that the idea of active and passive classes, and of counterparts, and of inversion, it's all very fun and very engaging, but I think it's kind of bullshit. But I also think it's real. I'm I hold that position with a lot of things, because very rarely is something completely fake or completely real, and more often than you'd think, I think things are often both completely fake and completely real, which I guess is looping back to hope and rage. This is a fun little journey that we're gonna go on. So rage is a very difficult aspect to pin down, because for a long time I could not understand how a person could be a rage player, because rage in text is just a facet of people, but it can't be all that you are. And that's because I wasn't looking at it as rage. I was looking at it as these words that I'd written down that were rage, that are rage, but not all of it. And I think that rage is done quite a disservice by being looked at in a formal lens, I guess, because rage is a very raw experience. Rage is possibly, probably paired with hope, the most raw aspect, the least easy to really define, because I mean, when I was explaining hope, I'm just talking about magic. Magic is such a, like, it's just a word that we apply to so many things that aren't magic, but we don't know how to explain them any better, so we say magic. And rage is the counterpart to that. And it's so interesting how this thing, which is based in skepticism, in opposition, inherently, is opposing something that isn't really real. And that's where it comes in, I think. Rage is, yes, about things that are wrong. It's about things that aren't real, but it's not just about things that aren't real. It's about things that aren't real. And that probably lost more than half of you. But I don't know how I'm gonna explain that better. Rage is when you look at someone and you can tell that they are not who they are putting themselves out to be. They are someone who looks like they have everything all together, who looks like they really, really know what they're doing, and it is true to them, but it's not. Rage is when you close your eyes and you don't see anything. The moments when there's not flashing colors, little morphy blobs, or your imagination, when it is just the back of your eyelids, and less than that, really, because I don't think you're processing the back of your eyelids. You're processing this darkness, this nothing, this lack of reality. Oh god, this is really going off the rails. Listen, okay. That's probably the best I can give for rage. And we're already 21 minutes into this. So, rage and hope are like that. And then void and light. I've compared these four aspects a lot because on paper, hope and rage are just kind of more raw versions of light and void, but in reality, that's not true. That's not really how things work. You can't really compare things in that way with this because it's actively opposing that idea. That's what classpecting is. It's an opposition to these rigid ideas that I love. And I think that's why I love classpecting so much, because it's a challenge for me. I have been working on this for years. Over, oh my god, like a decade on and off. And I still don't understand it entirely. And I think I could spend the rest of my life thinking about this and figuring it out more and more for me. And it's going to be different for you. I can't make it not different for you because classpecting is a personal thing. And let's talk about classes. So, inversion is a really cool idea. And classes are a really cool idea. And I think that the reason why classes are not as interesting to me is because I have done the same thing with them as I did with aspects, and I haven't repaired it yet. Classes are not a rigid thing. They can't be, and in my mind, they're more rigid than aspects. That is an inherent truth in my brain, but I don't think that's true. Classes are how you do things, and how you do things is honestly less rigid than how you think things. There's only... I mean, both are infinite, is the thing. It's capturing infinites, ultimately, no matter what you do. That is what this is. And that is inherently going to have flaws. Classpecting is imperfect, and it always will be. But it's imperfect in a way that I feel is very helpful. For me, at least, and I assume anyone who's 25 fucking minutes into this, classpecting is weird. I need to piss. I'll continue this later.